Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take. This one on Bernie Sanders. I want to talk about Bernie Sanders as an actual candidate, not necessarily the policies he wants to enact, but as just sort of a guy running for president. Bernie Bros. I can understand the appeal of Bernie in that he seems like a genuine guy. Like, I don't agree with 99% of the stuff he believes, but I understand that genuineness is very appealing, as well as his progressiveness. But the thing is, you have to face facts. This guy is 78, or going to be 78 when he takes office, if he's elected. He's had a heart attack already. That, when you have a heart attack, that leaves you weakened. 78 is the age, when you're 78 and you pass on, and I do not wish that on Bernie, but when you pass on, people don't ask what happened. That's how old 78 is. It's because 78 is elderly. And if you don't consider that elderly, then you have to consider 80 elderly, and he will be elderly when he's in office. And I feel that that's too old. I remember when Ronald Reagan was president, and right after he was done, they talked about he was losing his marbles towards the end of his presidency. We had a president who was losing it towards the end. His wife may have been running things. Think about that. And Bernie's ideas are already kind of wacky. The other problem with Bernie is, he has his strong points. He marched for civil rights. Good for him. That's totally a positive in his favor. But the thing is, he doesn't stand up for himself. In the 2016 campaign trail, Black Lives Matter interrupted one of his speeches, stole the microphone from him, and he really didn't do much to stop them. First off, how do protesters get on stage when you're running for office? Where is Bernie's security? Why aren't there people rushing up on stage immediately to grab these protesters and take them away? That is a far better look than having Bernie stand by as he's chastised by some randos in the Black Lives Matter community. Now, I'm not saying you have to arrest anybody or hurt anybody. I'm saying that he should have security. People shouldn't be allowed to get that close to a presidential candidate. It happened again just yesterday, I believe it was. Right in the middle of Bernie's deal, some young woman gets up, tries to steal the microphone from him. He kind of fought her, but then walked away, but she grabbed a different mic, which they turned off, and she started giving this vegan speech about being, that Bernie had to be against big dairy. And then some topless women ran on stage, and they poured stuff out of milk cartons on their breasts that had stuff written on them, like "Down with Big Dairy" or something like that. These are the people who supported him. Now, these are supporters. Think about that for a minute. If these people are his supporters, think of the kinds of people who are in his organization, that he's allowed to be in his organization. Again, I've talked about this before, the left needs limits. Bernie, if he's going to lead, needs to draw those limits. He needs to say, whoa, you can't come up on stage when I'm giving a speech. If you have a gripe or a complaint, here's the process to send it to me, and maybe I'll consider it. Part of the issue is people on the left, the further left you go, don't believe in hierarchy. They believe everyone's equal. And anyone who's ever been in a creative group, a band, an improv group, a comic book team, and I've been in at least two of those, you can try to run it like the communist system where everybody's equal, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's always somebody in the group who's more willful. Then there are people who get resentful because the more willful people in charge, and the tension begins. Whereas if someone comes out and says, I'm in charge, you work for me, but then treats people nicely, then everybody knows where they stand. The problem with trying to make everybody equal is not everybody is equal, and then nobody knows where they stand. So willful people, like this young vegan, can just stand up and try to grab the microphone because why not? She's just as equal to Bernie. Who cares who's president? It could be Bernie, it could be her, it could be anybody in the audience. That's not how a presidential candidate can run in the United States today. It's just not how it can work. It's just not how it works. I mean, obviously Bernie's the candidate. He had to fill out a lot of paperwork to do that. Whoever this young woman is, she is some rando who's trying to hijack his speech. And she didn't do him any favors if she's a supporter, because she made Bernie look weak again. Even though he tried to get the microphone back and then waited patiently while other people took her off stage, it shouldn't have even happened. Okay? You can't imagine a guy like Trump putting up with this, right? And Tim Pool said this in his video. He thinks Trump would have kicked her right off the stage. It's probably true. He certainly would have yelled at her, hey, get off the stage. This is my speech. And he would have called up his security goons and they would have ushered her away. She probably barely would have gotten 2 words out, assuming she got near the stage at all. Trump has tight security. I mean, he's had security his whole life. He's a rich guy. You got to have security when you're that rich. Bernie wants to believe that he's still a hippie guy who used to run Burlington, Vermont. He can't afford that luxury as president of the United States. This is a foolish decision on his part. He should have security guys who should stop people that get anywhere near the stage. They step on the stage, boom, they should be right on. Hey, get off the stage. Get off the stage right now, please. That's it. You don't have to hurt anybody. You don't have to tase them, although they should probably be armed in case a maniac comes up on the stage. What if that woman came up to kill him? What if that woman came up with a gun? So, this is a poor decision-making on Bernie's part. I think Bernie believes he could, usher in or be a part of a presidential run where people discuss ideas rather than, use optics to shape the message. That's a naive belief if he believes that. I think part of him does. Part of him wishes that. And you got to face facts. Trump is a master of optics. So that's not going to work. It's not going to work, no matter how good allegedly his ideas are. And I don't think they're very good. And I don't think he would win in that fair fight anyway. So Bernie is making poor decisions. And that's exactly why you're trying to get him as president. It's a poor decision not to have a security team that would stop people from getting to the stage. It's just a poor decision. It's also a poor decision for some of the things he's said over the years and believes and doesn't really discount. He once famously said, bread lines are a good thing. Bread lines are not a good thing. They're a very, very bad thing. Soviet Union, bad thing. He honeymooned there. He praised the Soviet system. To my knowledge, he hasn't come out and said, well, that was a stupid idea. I never should have went to the Soviet Union. I'm losing my Bernie voice. Sorry. The other thing, and this is very recent, he praised Venezuela. Now, anyone in this day and age could have seen, and I'm not an economist, I'm an amateur economist, but I knew enough that, the system under Venezuela, and back then when they first switched over and nationalized the oil, the price of oil was very high. And the thing about Venezuelan oil that's different from, say, Saudi Arabia's oil needs very little refining. You could practically take it out of the ground and put it right in your car. That's how little refining it needs. The Venezuelan oil is like tar. It needs way more refining, and therefore the Venezuelan oil isn't worth getting out of the ground until the oil gets to a certain level. And that's what happened to Venezuela. The price of oil went up so high, it was finally worth getting the majority of the Venezuelan oil out of the ground. And they had all this surplus, and they had lots of money. Well, instead of investing in an infrastructure, instead of, I don't know, ushering in more free markets and competition, they decided to give everybody in Venezuela microwaves and other gifts like that. That was fine for then, but what good are those microwaves now that they have no food to put in the microwaves? Now that it's all centralized and the oil prices went back down, and now they don't have all those extra funds to just piss away on free gifts, everything's kind of falling apart. And that isn't to say there aren't predatory capitalists out there who would have taken advantage of the Venezuelan. There are. But if you do things homegrown, if you allow people to have businesses and make some money, competition will weed out the weasels, and the guys who generally get ahead will at least provide a good service. Now, that doesn't mean everything will be perfect, but it means if one of 8 companies goes out of business, and it's oil refineries in Venezuela, then you still have 7 other refineries. But if you only got one giant oil system and the government falls to pieces, you got nothing. You need to diversify your portfolio economically. Venezuela didn't do that. And everybody, except Bernie Sanders, knew that back in the day. But didn't stop Bernie from praising them because they were socialist. And now look at them. There are horror stories coming out of Venezuela. They've eaten the zoo animals. It's a nightmare down there, and continues to be. And it's because of socialism. This is what Bernie Sanders wants to bring to you. He thinks he can make it work. He can't, because no one can. Because it's the problem with centralization. By centering everything into one system, when that system breaks down, everything breaks down. If you have several different smaller systems, then when one breaks down, the others compensate, and it's fine. That's why you want private as opposed to public. Public is centralized. It doesn't mean you can't have a few public things, but it doesn't mean you can't have some programs. But it means you want to have decentralized control. And Bernie believes in centralizing everything. He believes in centralizing healthcare. I've been watching a lot of videos from Sargon of Akkad. He talks about the NHS in the UK. That's the national healthcare system in the United Kingdom. The problem with it is they're constantly out of people. They are constantly out of resources. Prices continue to go up. Therefore, the taxes go up because people pay for it through their taxes. And now they're facing a real crisis. They're running out of resources. They've imported too many immigrants, and they're just running out of hospital resources, medical resources for people. This is going to create a system of who gets what. There are going to be lines. There's going to be corruption as people get bribed to get the health care they need or not. That is universal health care in a nutshell when it breaks down. Now, you might say, well, U.S. health care will never break down. That's not true. There's always going to be hard economic times. We are possibly facing one of the worst economic times with the virus, the coronavirus coming to the United States. If it breaks free, and it's likely to do so, we're looking at 1 to 2% of the population dying within, say, 2 or 3 months, depending. So imagine, I live in a town of about 2,000 people. That would mean 40 people would drop dead from the virus. Now duplicate that over the rest of the United States. Centralizing things won't help because they'll do everything the same way as they are doing in China. Whereas if you have a bunch of different systems operating independently and different from each other, yes, you may have people fall through the cracks, but you will have someone that innovates enough to say, hey, we've stumbled upon the solution because we were doing everything differently and weird, and we found this weird thing that solves our problem. So Bernie is just not a good choice. Bernie bros, please reconsider your support of Bernie and think about anybody else except Mike Bloomberg, who I will do a video about next.